Welcome to Transformational Vedic Astrology by Michael Mastro and vastucreations.com, American Institute of Vastu.com. Today we're going to look at the USA coronavirus and economy chart that's causing quite a bit of emotional crisis at this point and health crisis. So if we were to look to the eastern horizon, we're using the Articles of Confederation chart, which is for February 2nd, 1781 at 1651 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The chart for July 4th is when the United States was getting a divorce from England, and this is when the actual United States were born. And this chart has been tested over 100 events and found to be very, very accurate. And this, we're using, again, Vedic astrology, sidereal zodiac, and which is much more accurate than Western astrology, which is taking into the sun sign, which changes every 30 days. The ascendant changes every 2.5 hours. And actually, when at this time frame of February 2nd, 1781, if you look to the eastern horizon, you would see the constellation associated with Cancer rising at 18 degrees. So any planet or node of the moon, like Rahu and Ketu, that are close to that 18 degrees, have a lot of impact in the chart. In fact, Rahu and Ketu have a maximum impact in this chart. And we'll see that as we go through things. Now, if we want to first and see how the planets are operating, and then we're going to look at when they're operating and what we can do to remedy the chart. So first of all, we know that each of these houses represents something to do with some aspect of the United States. So basically, the first house has to do with national identity. The second house has to do with families and wealth. Third house has to do with entrepreneurial success, IT. Fourth house has to do with communal harmony, whether people are in harmony or there's a lot of divisiveness. Fifth house has to do with the stocks. Eighth house has to do with national health. Seventh house has to do with foreign partnerships. Eighth house has to do with natural disasters. 12th house has to do, the ninth house has to do with government and religion, and 10th house has to do with the government and the leadership, and then the 11th house has to do with connections, social connections, income, prosperity of the country, and then the 12th house has to do with hospitalization, imprisonment, and losses. So if we look to see at certain dates what's happening here, it becomes much more clear. And for that, we need to look at the transit chart. Now, we're in a Sun-Mercury period. So Sun has to do with the president, the leadership, the government, and Mercury has to do with business and communication. And so it actually, has some good aspects to this period. But when we look at the transit chart, we can see some interesting things going on. So let's see. So this chart is a circular chart. Basically, the inner circle is just like the chart we looked at. It's where the planets were they were born, and these are all the houses. And then the outer chart is where the planets are when we look at specific dates. So we're gonna go back a few months, and we're gonna see how these transits kind of affect everything. So how this coronavirus manifests has to do with the country's chart. You can see in the Italian chart is a Taurus rising. and they have a lot of the planets creating afflictions in the 8th house, which is the house of epidemics. And then China, which also has had a lot of issues, is a Capricorn chart with a lot of things happening in the 12th house of losses and separations and end of life. And then the US chart here is this Cancer situation where you have a lot of planets having issues in the 6th house, which is the national health. So if we look here at the 10th of January, you can see K2 and Jupiter are afflicting each other in the house of health. So creating a lot of stress on health. And then you also see Saturn and Sun. Sun also is an indicator of government and health. And Saturn here is death-like experiences and epidemics. So all these planets are all bunched up here. And then as we move on, if we go to February 11th, something else happens. Watch Rahu and Ketu and the nakshatras. If you go to February 10th, or actually 11th, you'll see that Ketu moves into Mula and Rahu into Ardra. These two nakshatras have to do with destruction. So, and it's very interesting. If you go, Rahu and Ketu are in this position every 18 years. So if you go back 18 years, that's 2001, the bombing of the Twin Towers, 9/11. If you go back another 18 years, 1982, same position, Gemini, Sagittarius, Rahu, Ketu, Ardra, Mula, and you will see that that was the AIDS virus. If you go back another 18 years, you'll see 1963, the assassination of President Kennedy. If you go back another 18 years, you'll see the bombing of Hiroshima. And you can keep going like that. And also, every 9 years, Ardra and Mula, these positions will be reversed. So some of the Spanish flu and things like that were occurring at certain times like that. So let's keep going with our transits here. If we move to the 29th, and just kind of watch how Mars and K2 are coming together here in that 6th house of health issues. Now Mars is courage to invest, and so big drops in the stock market then. And then you see Sun and Mercury coming together in the 8th house. Mercury is combust. And this is, again, having to do with the epidemic. And Mercury is, natal Ketu is afflicting Mercury and Sun there. And Mercury has to do with our respiratory system. So now, if we look at our next date, the 20th, March 19th. Let's go here, March 19th. Look at how Mars now is going to afflict Jupiter. So Mars is right on top of Jupiter in this 6th house of health, national health. So again, Jupiter is afflicting Mars. So courage to invest in the stock market and military starting to get involved in helping with the virus, fighting the war of the virus, basically. And then if we keep going here, if we go to the March 31st, now, there is something else that I haven't discussed too much, but around the 20th, there's going to be some major shifts as well with this Mars-Jupiter thing. Mars actually, as it pulls away and gets stronger in the 7th house, it's going to afflict Saturn on March 31st. So Saturn's afflicting Mars, excuse me. So again, Saturn is end-of-life, death-like experiences, viruses and epidemics and things like that. And then Mars begins to pull away. And then, let's see, the next date we want to look at is the 10th of April. 10th of April is here. Now, on the 10th of April, we see, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars all bunched up here in the 7th house. And Mercury is moving from is moved from the 8th house of end of life into this 9th house of good fortune. So that creates some improvement. Now Mercury is having to do with success, maybe of starting some trials for the virus, etc., and then they're creating some success around that. Now, if we keep going here to the 24th of April, watch what happens to Sun and Moon. They become exalted. This is called Akshatreta, and it happens at least around once a year, and it's said to be a very, very powerful time. So again, cures and ways to treat the virus will come into being. So that's very, very powerful date. You see here, Sun is exalted in Ashwini, and Moon is exalted in Kritika. Okay, so then the next date we want to look at. So I start to think, towards the end of April, things will peak and get under a little bit more control. Now, the next thing that happens, it's going to still continue on for some time. But the next thing we're going to look at is in September, around the September 19th, we see that Rahu and Ketu, they move out of Sagittarius and out of Gemini into Taurus and Scorpio. And also, they move out of those destructive nakshatras. So we begin to rebuild. So this is a sign, very positive sign. So the next thing that happens is the election on November 11th. And you can see that the K2 is afflicting Saturn. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's and there will be definitely some kind of disturbance around the election and who won and protesting and things like that. Next thing we want to look at is this Jupiter-Saturn affliction that happens in December. And this could be, Saturn again is the epidemic in health. So there could be some flare-ups around that virus, probably, let's see here, that's the 20th of December, and that carries on through January. So there could be some more flare-ups around that or something else, something that could happen. Now, what is the point of astrology? It is to be a guide, to raise our consciousness, to have more compassion for others. It's a path to happiness and enlightenment. So whenever humanity gets out of balance, so the law of nature is that nature will create some event to restore that balance. And so, we get to see with astrology that we're going to always be in change. But there's a duration to that change, duration to that crisis. It's not going to be forever. Things will get better. And then we can, have some hope there. So what happens when you have these crises everybody goes into fear. Fear creates illness. Illness creates fear. It's a vicious cycle. And the way to break that cycle is to regain trust. Trust can eliminate fear by connecting with the divine within us. That is the way. And it's through the breath, through exercise, being in nature, connecting with the divine through meditation, and boosting our immune system by getting, light, going out in nature and getting exercise and drinking lots of water and taking really good care of ourselves. So, as you can see, this is very powerful. Transformational Vedic astrology. If you'd like a reading, you can go to www.vastucreations.com to see how all these planets will be affecting you during this time period. Or if you'd like to learn Transformational Vedic astrology, you can go to American Institute of Vastu.com. Thank you so much for listening.